Long motorcycle trips are a point of pride for most riders. It's a chance to connect with their machine, see the world, and just experience some of the best that two wheels has to offer. Maybe you've taken a trip over the weekend to the mountains with your buddies. Maybe you've done a coast-to-coast ride or an iron butt. Hell, maybe you've done a Trans-America trail on your BMW GS outfitted with all the latest and greatest tech. But in all honesty, it pales in comparison to today's story. Today I'm going to tell you about Emilio Scotto, an Argentinian motorcyclist who holds the world record from Guinness for the longest motorcycle trip ever. His transcontinental trip took 10 years to complete, with over 500,000 miles logged over 232 different countries, which represents over 99% of the landmass on Earth. So what venerable steed did Emilio Scotto use for this ridiculous journey? Well, nothing else except the Goldwing would do. Emilio was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and he had a lifelong dream of adventure and travel. As many riders can relate to, this sense of adventure and excitement led him to motorcycling. In 1980, he purchased a brand new Honda Goldwing Interstate, and he logged over 30,000 miles in his first couple of years, but this surely would not be enough for Emilio. It's pretty common for riders to use their motorcycles for longer distance weekend rides, maybe even a couple weeks long journeys somewhere out in the wild. But this was not enough for Emilio. He was determined to take his venerable Goldwing, which he dubbed the Black Princess, to places that no one imagined possible and further than anyone could have dreamed. In 1985, Scotto was working as a sales rep for Pfizer, the gigantic conglomerate, when he decided to quit his job and sell all of his belongings and hit the road. Working a corporate gig can tend to do that to you. I'm sure many of you in the audience can relate to working some soulless corporate job and having escapist dreams on your motorcycle. And that's why a lot of dads end up with adventure bikes, right? Scotto had nothing but his Goldwing and $300 in his pocket, and he prepared to embark on the trip of a lifetime. And to be honest, that feels like a bit of an understatement, because what he ended up doing is probably the trip of several different lifetimes. He was just a dude with a Goldwing. He didn't have any corporate sponsorships, an Instagram page, a YouTube channel, a film crew, support staff, nothing like that. He didn't even have prior international travel experience before doing this. He was just a dude with a Goldwing and a dream, and so in 1985, he set off. And that's kind of romantic, isn't it? As Scotto began his journey, he was immediately met with some pretty bad luck. When crossing the border from Argentina into Uruguay, he was mocked by the border officials, who said that his journey to go around the world with his Goldwing was just a silly little dream. When he crossed the border into Brazil, he was left with just enough resources after being robbed in Rio de Janeiro to make it about 600 miles north to Salvador. There, he happened to strike upon a friendship with a wealthy family. This man was kind enough to sponsor Scotto, and this continued his journey on his motorcycle. I think we need to bring back that certain genre of rich person, like the Medicis from the 1500s, that would be patrons to people doing crazy and weird stuff that otherwise doesn't really make a whole lot of commercial success. Traveling north, Emilio came across the Amazon rainforest, which you can imagine on a Goldwing might be impassable. He was actually told that this part of the jungle where he was going to go was impassable by basically any vehicle, your 4x4s, your Jeeps, or anything like that. And keep in mind, this guy was on a 1980s Goldwing, but instead, he and his Goldwing boarded a shipping vessel that was going up on the Amazon River towards Manaus, Brazil. It was on this ship that Scotto experienced one of his most noteworthy encounters. After boarding with his bike, Scotto realized that this ship was actually occupied by about 36 different criminals and outlaws. These bandits actually stayed in the jungle to avoid the scrutiny of the law. I mean, you can imagine in the 80s, if you live in the jungle, you can basically get away with whatever you want. One night on the ship, a group of these suspected criminals were involved in a high-stakes card game. The pot on the table was piled high with gold, weapons, and money. Scotto was forcefully coerced into playing the game, but instead of losing his hand or his life, he actually ended up winning 5 hands in a row. The bandits accused him of cheating, but when he refused to accept his winnings, they said it would be insulting if he didn't take it. The next morning when they docked in Manaus, the leader of the group actually passed him a crumpled up bits of notes from all the crew, wishing him well on his journey. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up. And it gets even crazier. The leader actually disclosed that the whole card game, the high-stakes situation, was actually a whole farce, designed basically to award Scotto to continue funding his journey, and of course having a little bit of fun at his expense. Can you imagine how much charisma and aura this Scotto guy must have? It's insane. He is the main character. These bandits were functionally forced to live in the jungle to avoid criminal prosecution, so they actually turned to Scotto and they felt really good about supporting him in his journey and were able to live vicariously through him. When Emilio made it to Nicaragua up into Central America, he was immediately met with a country in turmoil. In one instance, he unwittingly hit a giant speed bump which sent him and his Goldwing airborne. He slowed down to collect himself and he was immediately met with gunfire. Nicaragua was enduring a civil war at the time, and the soldiers who emerged from the bush who were firing at him accused him of being a CIA agent who was siding with the Contras. He was eventually able to convince the soldiers that he was just merely a tourist from Argentina just passing through, but that's pretty crazy. One of the greatest through lines of Scotto's adventures is the kindness of people he found all over the world, and this is a theme you really see when you see documentaries about people traveling around the world. Most people are kind and willing to help even when they have very, very little to share. In fact, it's usually the poorest among the world who are most willing to share and help others. When he wasn't playing cards with bandits or being fired upon by soldiers, he was receiving pro bono help from anyone along the way. Emilio made it into the southwestern United States and he was blown away by how polite the border officials were, how clean everything was, and the modern, simple highway system of America. He also familiarized himself with the United States legal system, having racked up 7 speeding tickets in California alone. Scotto toured the US, visiting San Francisco, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and even Disney World. By the time he made it to the East Coast, he was flat broke and he had to go take a job at a deli in New York City. His global adventures started to gather media attention, and after a TV appearance, he received enough donations to continue the journey. From New York, he went to Europe, where he experienced the stark contrast between Western Europe and Eastern Europe at that time in the late 80s. From Europe, he traveled south into Africa with the goal of visiting all 55 countries on the continent. He entered the Sahara Desert, where he rode in increasingly deep sand, again on a Goldwing, and he endured unbearable heat. As he was contemplating turning back, he was hit by a crazy sandstorm with monsoon-level winds that tore his visor off and caused him to nearly lose his life. He huddled against his bike, struggled to breathe, and after 4 hours of enduring the sandstorm, it finally subsided, with his bike stripped of all the chrome on it. Continuing on the African continent, he encountered insane things. Massive 10-foot potholes, dense jungles, and bloodthirsty mosquitoes. His quote on his experience in Africa sums it up succinctly. "I had encountered a million unexpected things. New lands, deadly situations, new rules, new beliefs, new realities. Children starving, armies fighting, human sacrifices, cannibalism, and more. I emerged from Africa a bit scarred, but definitely battle-hardened. Yet I knew something was missing from my life." Imagine enduring all of this adventure and you still think something's missing. I guess adventure guys really are broken. Emilio had left his girlfriend Monica in Argentina before starting his journey so that she could go to India and the two could be together. In India, the couple was met with even more kindness. They were seen as celebrities. When the Goldwing's drive shaft gearing was busted, 20 locals helped lift the bike up into the back of a cargo truck where it was transported to Dhaka for free alongside a bunch of potatoes. While in the capital city, Emilio and Monica were given a free stay at one of the nicest hotels. They were given free meals at restaurants and welcomed by locals in their homes. Honda of Bangladesh even fixed the Black Princess free of charge. From India, Emilio and Monica started hopping the islands in the South Pacific, not least hitting an emu at 75 miles an hour. Scotto traveled between the islands via different boats. During all this island hopping, Scotto made his way to the smallest republic in the world, Nauru, which is only 8 square miles and a tiny little island nation. Not only was he the first Argentinian to ever visit there, his bike was actually the first motorcycle to ever visit the nation. At the Honda factory in Japan, where Scotto eventually made his way, the HRC factory actually fixed and refreshed his Goldwing for free. How cool is that? They worked on the cams, the heads, the carbs, the brakes, the forks, and they even rebuilt the frame on this machine. At this point, Emilio Scotto's journey was basically the best marketing campaign that Honda had ever had since the Nice campaign in the 60s. Scotto was even granted special privileges in China. The kindness he was receiving at this point wasn't just from random strangers, it was corporations who willingly wanted to help out, probably for marketing initiatives, but probably just out of goodwill too. While he was originally told that it would cost $70,000 to enter China, he was able to get some help with the Motorcycle Club of Beijing and the Olympic Committee that were able to finesse things a little bit and get him into the country. There, he could tour the country freely, just as if he were a Chinese citizen, which at the time was completely unheard of. No supervision, no weird rules. He could come and go as he pleased in China, of all places, at this time. He was the first outsider to tour Mongolia in 75 years. He crossed the Gobi Desert and rode alongside the Great Wall for 1,000 miles until he met the border with the Soviet Union at the time. Except he hadn't realized that at this point, there was no Soviet Union and he was actually in the newly formed country of Kazakhstan. And after leaving China, he was no longer allowed to go back there either. So he was restricted to a half-mile strip of land between the two countries with no food or water. Thanks to the magic of media, Chinese TV crews were able to interview him and get him enough exposure to get him back to Beijing and get the proper visa to go visit Kazakhstan. He actually traveled 4,000 miles back to Beijing to do that. The former Soviet Union was a huge bummer. It seemed that all the decades of communism had left it much worse off than it had been, and he made his way to Spain. By this point, Scotto had taken on lots of sponsorships. Pepsi, Metzler, and even a Spanish oil company. In fact, this oil company had just developed a new synthetic oil that they wanted to test in very cold weather conditions, and Scotto, being Scotto, put knobbies on his Goldwing and headed to Iceland. After Scandinavia, where Scotto realized his bike was just a little too heavy to ride in the snow, he made his way back to the US and to Mexico, and he visited 27 different Caribbean islands, and also a VIP treatment in Cuba, which is pretty crazy for the time. After 10 years, Emilio made it back to Argentina. By 1995, Scotto had traveled to over 200 different countries on his Goldwing. He went through 13 different passport books that had 64 pages each, circumnavigating the globe not once, but twice. He traveled over 457,000 miles with his machine, remarkably going through just 2 engines. And if that's not glowing praise for the Honda Goldwing and a staunching endorsement, I don't know what is. He used over 12,500 gallons of gas, 350 gallons of oil, 86 tires, 12 batteries, and 9 new seats. He was imprisoned 6 different times. 5 times in Africa and once in the US. He was robbed 5 times, shot at twice, and he endured tornadoes, earthquakes, and hurricanes. Emilio Scotto's Black Princess is on display at the Don Laughlin Classic Car Museum in Laughlin, Nevada. He wrote a book about the journey entitled The Longest Ride, My 500,000-Mile Motorcycle Journey, which includes more than 300 different photos of the adventure. So what did we learn today? Well, people are friendlier than you think, and if you have a dream for a big adventure, go do it. Life is short. You'd be amazed what you can make happen with the limited amount of resources. We also learned that motorcycles apparently ended the Cold War, and your iron butt just doesn't look quite as impressive when you compare it to Emilio Scotto's insane trip. And to all the adventurers out there, thanks for making motorcycling interesting. It's always a ton of fun to go out there and experience the world on 2 wheels. Thanks so much for watching today's video. We couldn't include everything about Emilio Scotto's journey in one small video, of course, so go and check out the rest on the internet. It is a really cool story. Thanks again for watching. We'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later. Wake up! You're dreaming! You're dreaming! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! None of this is real! None of it's real! None of it's real! Wake up! Keep watching Amy Noob.